Deanne Smith, and I'm the curator of Onsite Gallery, which is OCADU's professional gallery. So welcome to the end of the world. It's really great to see you guys here. Our time is really precious today, so I'm going to make the introduction very brief. But I would like us to acknowledge the ancestral and territorial traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we stand. And I'd like us to just think about that for a second, especially in this context. I think it's important for us to think about this land and its history and how we use it and how we share it. I think it'd be nice for us to ground ourselves here for just a minute. I think it's nice to think of it and then give a look to that cityscape behind us and to the water. A huge thank you to Lane Hinton and Rui Pimenta of Artspin for making this all happen at Ontario Place. I know it was no small feat. I'd also like to thank our team of Linda, who's ever working hard, Linda Columbus, and Khadijah Morley and Jeff Cruz. And I'd also like to thank the Small World Music Festival for providing the music. I think it's a really nice mix of bringing together the art and the music. So as we are getting ready to hear Wanda share with us, I'd like us all to think a little bit about a few questions. What is the world or worlds? Who defines them? What is an end? Is the end of the world something to celebrate or to be sad about? And how do we feel about those questions? What would you say if you had to give a lecture that was the very last lecture you ever had to give at the end of the world? And come tomorrow, we have Jordan Beria. He's the poet, spoken word poet, and director of Spoken Heard, and he's really an incredible speaker. We have next weekend, we have Gabriel Aladula, and he is a farm worker and an organizer for justice for migrant workers. And they're having a big march that's happening right now from Leamington, Ontario to Ottawa. And they'll be in Toronto next weekend. And then on Sunday, we have Rusba Ahbari, who's with us today. He is an artist, a researcher, and he'll be speaking to the post-Anthropocene and world systems. Is that a good quick summary? So we're all here today to welcome Wanda. Thank you so much for being part of our lecture series. This series is put on by Onsite Gallery, who's part of OCAD University. And Onsite is without a space right now. We're doing off-site programming. We'll launch our new space in the new or current end of the world next June. And we exhibit art, design, digital media, and we focus on experimental curatorial practices. And we have an agenda to affect social and cultural change. So that's I made it brief. Wanda is how do I pronounce it properly? I've been struggling and listening to videos. Anishinaabe Kwe. Image and word warrior, curator, and community organizer from Beausoleil First Nation.
That one's French.
Pronunciation. And since I know you're from there, I looked that one up too. She is the first curator of Indigenous art at the Art Gallery of Ontario. And she teaches graduate courses at OISE at the University of Toronto. Her book, Violence No More, through Art Press, and an anthology on Indigenous curatorial writing will be published soon. And Wanda's also finishing a documentary on Gerald Visnor, and an experimental film on Indigenous resistance. She has a master's degree in visual studies from the University of Toronto. And she's really busy right now, and it was really generous of you to come and be with us today, and so thank you very much.
Thanks. So thank you all, miigwech to all of you for coming in the rain. I know it's not easy, it's a trek. It kind of feels like we're at the end of the world on this little peninsula here. And with this weather, it's kind of perfect. So I'm an Anishinaabe Kwe, so I'm going to be speaking from within that world. And the world of that is also part of, obviously, this so-called New World of the country now called Canada. And so it's also about the intersection of those worlds. I'm not going to redo the acknowledgement, but I do want to acknowledge the land of Canada as Indigenous territory from coast to coast. That we share with everyone who's come since, and that is the fundamental relationship with this country. So I want to acknowledge that. You guys can come and sit wherever, don't worry. There's only seats at the front, so then you have to sit like right up here. So these talks are fairly casual, and I want to tell a couple of stories, partly because I think if it were the end of the world, that's all I would want to do. Is like I would just want to tell stories. The worlds of the Anishinaabe, and there are worlds. There's the sky world, the underneath world, and then there's the old world and the new world. We are living, in my mind, already after the end of the world. Twice. We've gone through it twice already, maybe more. It depends on who you talk to. But we went through the first apocalypse we went through was the flood, the big flood, and it's nice because, you've got Gilgamesh, you've got Noah, you've got all these stories of floods all around the world. So for me, being located in the Great Lakes area, that flood would have been around 16,000 years ago. So that's our first apocalypse. And that leads me to this idea of the earth diver. Somebody who dives for earth, dives for land. So the story goes that Nanibush, and my name is Nanibush, I'm named after Nanibush, who's a trickster figure for lack of a better word. It's not a great translation, it's not a great way to think about it, because he doesn't play tricks. He's sometimes foolish, so he changes the world through making mistakes. Sometimes he changes the world through helping us see ourselves, what's foolish about us, what's foolish about what we're doing. Sometimes, and I'm saying he, but Nanibush is not a he, not a she. It's like he can be a he can be a she, he can transform to a rabbit, he can transform into a bird, he can always shift. He's a shapeshifter, a transformer. So that places the idea of transformation at the center of the Anishinaabe world. So the other part I think about Nanibush that's important, or Nanibush, is the way in which all structures, any structure, whether it's gender, sexuality, anything that makes us feel really at home and comfortable, is disrupted by Nanibush. And it's how society shifts and changes. It's my favorite part, and that's the part I take seriously in terms of my own life and what's my role in this world. And I think the end of the world is the kind of moment where those kinds of transformations happen. So it's not really an end, it's always a new beginning, and always one that should transform us into a better place. So that's the kind of thinking that I'm going to be doing today. So I'm not going to be all like, it's horrible! We're awful! So the earth diver story. So Nanibush, the land was flooding because the ice was melting. So this story is really old. If you think about it being passed down orally for 16,000 years, it's like pretty intense. That's like deep memory. And it changes for every generation. They use it however they need to. And I think the story we need again right now. So what it is there's a flood, everybody dies. It's a very happy story. Everybody's dead, except for Nanibush, because he's half spirit, half human, so he's able to survive. And he always works by his wits. So he builds a raft with all the floating logs that are floating in the water. And he sits on the raft, and the animals come. There's birds that are able to stay alive because they can fly. There's animals that can swim, and they adapt to the water situation. So he wants to build a new land for the people to begin again. So he needs earth. So you have to go deep, 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 deep through the water into the old world. So this idea that underneath the flood and the water is this other old world. And lots of animals try, two in particular, that everybody thinks would be great at it, like the loon or the beaver. They're not great. They don't do it. They can't even reach the bottom. And so the muskrat comes along and he's like, I can do this, like I want to do this, and they all just start laughing at him. They make fun of him. He's like not, this regal kind of animal. They don't know what his skills really are. They can't figure him out. They just think he's nothing. So while they're all arguing and laughing at him, he just goes. He just dives. He goes and does his work. So he goes so long, he's gone so long that they assume he died and that he's gone. And then all of a sudden his body floats to the surface and he's got dirt in his hand, but he's dead. So he died in order for this new world to be born. He's our Jesus Christ, the muskrat. Don't take offense. We all have different Jesuses. So he's floating around with this water, and they all stop laughing. And they're all filled with the sense of the purpose of this animal and the determination of this animal that they had written off. And then the turtle comes along because they need some place to put the earth. So the snapping turtle comes along and he puts out his back and he says, here's where you can put the earth. So the earth gets laid down, and Nanibush does all his magic to make the earth grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And he asks the birds to sort of look and to keep looking and to see when is the earth big enough for everybody? When is the earth sort of big enough that we can survive on it? So there's a limit to how much it can grow. There's a limit to how far it should go. And it should only go as far as it is to sustain us. Grows. And then the muskrat, he breathes life back into the muskrat. And so the muskrat is this animal that can live in the mud, can live in the water, can live on land. It's kind of got this beautiful way of living anywhere. And it doesn't matter what you do to their environment. You can flood it, you can destroy it, you can pollute it, and their population multiplies like crazy. So they're amazingly resilient, and that's the spirit that Nanibush gave to the muskrat in order to thank him for his sacrifice. But it's also a story that says something about what we're supposed to be like. We're supposed to be somewhat like the muskrat, somewhat like Nanibush, somewhat like the birds, and somewhat like the turtle. All of it. So these are earth diver stories, and earth diver stories are actually, you can find them in most cultures. A lot of cultures have earth diver stories. Just like a lot of cultures have some kind of idea of us coming from the sky to the earth and landing on the earth. I'm not telling those stories today. So that was our first apocalypse. So then the world begins again. Begins anew. People have lots of sex. People have lots of kids. Human population expands. People are peaceful and loving and brothers and sisters. And then they accumulate things. They accumulate land, they accumulate properties, they accumulate hunting territories. So they start accumulating things, and then as soon as that accumulation reaches a certain point, greed sets in. And then there's violence between people, and evil things that we do to each other to maintain what we have or maintain our accumulation. And I'm still sitting in the Anishinaabe stories, FYI. So at one point, Nanibush looks around and he's like, this is what we saved the world for? Like, everybody's fighting with each other. Everybody's greedy, and there's no more peace in the world. And people start, destroying the land, the earth. And for us, the earth is our first mother. So it's the one who teaches us how to care for our children, care for ourselves. And I'm not talking about that today. So he looks around and he's talking with his grandmother, Nokomis. And she says she thinks that the problem is the evil gambler. There's a spirit in the world, the evil gambler. And this guy, you can go to him and gamble for the spirit of the people, and it will release the evil. So that's happening. And I'm using English words. We don't have a word for evil in our language, but for the sake of translation, we'll just go with evil. But it's a little too Christian for me. What we have is sickness of the soul, or living unbalanced. It's like a totally different idea. So those things can always be healed. They can always be fixed. It's a totally different idea. So his grandmother tries to convince him not to go. She's like, no, don't go. It's like the worst journey you could take. It's too dangerous. You're going to die. And he's like, no, I have to be the one to battle for the soul of the people. He's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to defeat the evil gambler. So I'm going to read a certain version of this story. There are many versions. And I have a version of my own. But this morning I was drinking coffee and chatting with my partner on the phone. And I remembered this version while I was talking, and it was because of our conversation about where the world is headed and what's the end of the world. So I feel like this means this is the one I'm supposed to tell you. To me. So I'm going to tell you this version. And this is like Gerald Visner, who I'm doing the documentary on. He's like an Anishinaabe philosopher, writer, and artist, fiction writer from the States, from Minnesota, from White Earth. And I think of him also like our Derrida, because he's like super crazy smart and making up new words, which freaks people out. But he has a deep and profound commitment to living Anishinaabe worldviews in contemporary times, like right now. And he has a deep and profound commitment to the power of imagination and transformation. So this is why I love him. So I'm gonna tell you the story of the evil gambler. Again, that stupid word. Let me find it. So this is The Four Ages of Man, is also another title for it. And always in Anishinaabe, we don't have man and woman. So whenever they say man or woman, it's like we don't have those kinds. Our language isn't designed that way. So kwe means woman. So it goes on the end of the Anishinaabe, who I am. Woman is attached to that. But as far as like speaking, like I am so and so and so, we don't have gendered pronouns. So I guess I could say human. That's an English word I don't like too because it means of man. So that's also great either. So my grandson, the land which you intended to visit is infested with many evil spirits and the followers of those who eat human flesh. I think every culture doesn't like cannibals. No one who has ever been within their power has ever been known to return. First they charm their victims by the sweetness of their songs. Then they strangle and devour them. But your principal enemy will be the great gambler, who has never been beaten and who lives beyond the realm of darkness. Therefore, my grandson, I would beseech you, I love that word, beseech, that doesn't exist in Anishinaabe either. I beseech you to not to undertake so dangerous a journey. Nanibojo listened to his grandmother, but as the hero that he thought he was, he felt he was brave enough and should show no fear and know no fear. The warning words of Nokomis, his grandmother, were unheeded. Nanabush consulted the different birds and the animals and the good spirits, and it was decided that the owl would lend him his eyes, and the firefly would accompany him to light the way through the realms of darkness. The path which Nanabush was traveling led him through swamps, over high mountains, and by yawning chasms, where he saw the hideous stare of 1,000 gleaming eyes. And he heard the groans and hisses and yells of countless fiends, gloating over their many victims of sin and shame. And he knew that this was the place where the great gambler consigned the spirits of his many victims. Approaching the entrance to the wigwam, that's our homes, we don't live in teepees, Nanabush raised the mat of scalps, which served as the door. He found himself in the presence of the great gambler. He was a curious-looking being who seemed almost round in shape. So Nanabush, you too have come to try your luck. You think I'm not an expert gambler? So the great gambler reached for his war club and chuckled a horrible sound of scorn and ridicule. I'm not going to do that sound for you. I'm not that great of a storyteller. All of these hands you see hanging around this wigwam are the hands of your people who came here to gamble. They thought, as you are now thinking, they played and they lost their life. I seek no one to come and gamble with me but those who would gamble their lives. Remember that I demand the lives of those who gamble with me and lose. I keep the scalps and the ears and the hands, and the rest of the body is given to my friends, the flesh eaters. The spirits of those who have lost their lives I consign to the land of darkness. And he was grinning with confidence, as great gamblers do. Now I have spoken, and we will play. The great gambler took in his hands the Anishinaabe dish game, and it's a game we all play. Took in his hands the Anishinaabe dish game and said to Nanabush, "Here are the 4 figures, the 4 ages of man, which I will shake in the dish 4 times." We love the number 4, by the way. Really love the number 4. If they assume a standing position each time, then I am the winner. Should they fall, then you are the winner. Laughing, Nanabush looked at the dish and the 4 ages of man and told the great gambler beyond the realm of darkness, "Very well, we will play. But it is customary for the party who is challenged to play any game to have the last play." The great gambler consented while taking up the dish for the first time and striking it on the ground. The 4 figures were all standing. This was repeated 2 more times by the gambler, and each time the 4 figures were standing. The destiny of Nanabush and the Anishinaabe depended upon the one chance remaining. Should the 4 ages of man fall in the standing position, Nanabush would lose, and the spirit of the Anishinaabe people would be consigned to the flesh eaters in the land of the darkness. When the great gambler prepared to make the final shake of the game, Nanabush drew near, and when the dish came down to the ground, he made a teasing whistle on the wind, and all the 4 figures of the 4 ages of man fell. The Anishinaabe people had not lost their spirit to the land of darkness. When Nanabush seized the dish from Great Gambler, he said, "Now it's my turn, and should I win, you will lose your life." And he cracks the dish on the ground. We don't know the rest of that. That's the end of that story. So along with transformation is this idea of chance and the throwing yourself into that moment of chance, and that life is not as orderly as we think it is. It's actually the two underlying things are transformation and chance. And because we're cracking the dish on the ground, we are still fighting we are still one forever. We still have to defeat that darkness and that spirit that makes us violent and fighting and greedy and accumulative. I think that's the early apocalypse. We have another one that makes us post-apocalyptic, and that's colonization. That's the coming of all the coming of all the oppressed people and also the greedy people from Europe, basically. The only thing I would say, I'm not giving a history of colonization today, you read a book. All I would say is that there is something about thinking about us living already after an apocalypse. And that apocalypse of colonization was an end of our world as we knew it. Everything changed, including the economy, including our relationship to the land, including our relationship to each other, our societies, our governance practices. It was a radical, radical break and shift towards a capitalist viewpoint, towards Enlightenment thinking, the yucky Victorians. Sorry, I really hate the Victorians. We're still living with their morality here in Toronto, and I hope it ends soon. The difference with the Anishinaabe is that because we already been for our spirit, when we went through colonization, it didn't. 500 years later, we still haven't lost our spirit that we gained that day in front of the evil gambler. And that's important to think about. So even though the world radically shifted, the spirit of the Anishinaabe is still there. And thankfully the land is still there, but this is where we're at right now. If we're thinking of coming to a third apocalypse on this land here, on Turtle Island, that's where we're at right now. That's what I see as our next end of the world. And that is like the extension of capitalism to its entire logic. And I think Indigenous people, we're standing, and not all Indigenous people, we're not all the same, we don't all think the same, and we've been traumatized by this system. But many, and more every day, are doing exactly what the Earth Diver did, which is bringing the dirt into our hands and building a new world. And part of that process, it makes me. I was thinking about Apocalypto, the film by Mel Gibson. I don't know why that was the first thing that popped into my head when I thought of the end of the world. It's really unfortunate that's the first thing that popped in my head. It's so sad. The anti-Semitic drunk. But anyway, he created an allegory. So it's not about Indigenous people. This is the thing about Western culture and us, is like we're never treated as actual people. We're always allegories or extensions of the West's vision of themselves. So it's not really like we get to be ourselves in that space. So I don't think of, I'm not going to sit there and say, Apocalypto got the Mayans wrong. It did. We all know it. It's very clear. They were not cannibals in the same way. They weren't throwing like thousands of people off cliffs and sacrificing them. They're not these like horrible savages. I hate that I have to keep saying that, but it's true. But for Mel Gibson's point of view, so let's just take it seriously for a second. It was an allegory of environmental destruction. So he was using the period when the Mayan civilization had reached its epicness. So it was building. It was felling trees. Its civilization had reached the accumulation level where it starts destroying the earth. And then it starts destroying itself. And actually my partner and I were talking on the phone and he said something smart. It does happen sometimes. Oh no, don't record that part. But he said, every time we think we're destroying the earth, we're only destroying ourselves. And it's a different slant on where I'm headed with this conversation, but it's the same idea. So Mayan civilization had reached this point, and so that's really why he picked that part, picked that setting for the film, was to talk about where we are at right now in terms of accumulation and destruction. The thing I find interesting about that idea of apocalypse, or that idea of the end of the world, is that it's still a happy thing. This is not a popular idea, but our elders do tell us this. we need to work as hard as possible to prevent the destruction of our worlds, because we are the protectors of the earth. We're protectors of the water. We're the protectors of animals. But if it happens that we don't learn our lessons and we don't keep that spirit alive, and we are decimated, the earth will always take care of itself. It will always regenerate. It will just transform into something else. But the fact that we're not here is not the real end of the world. It's like we're just, we can disappear, and the earth will sort of regenerate itself. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to do everything possible to make sure that that doesn't happen. Which is why Nanibush went to the evil gambler in the first place. He could have just let us destroy ourselves, but that isn't our purpose. So all these people. So what interested me about Apocalypto was actually the idea of deforestation that is in the film. The idea that the trees, like raising all the trees, is actually killing us. So I was thinking, like, the trees are our breath and the source of protection for our food. And the water is our lifeblood. And the earth is our body. And so all of these things are necessary for us. Like, we're created out of them, and we're dependent on each aspect of them to survive. And I think that as multinational companies and governments are, like, impotent in the face of them, sorry men, I don't like that word impotent, but it's there. So our governments are impotent in the face of them because they've built a system that relies so much on them. So they can't really fight them. So it's only people who can fight them. And all the pollution and all the sites of destruction are mostly in indigenous territories. So again, 500 years, we are still not tired. Like, I find it amazing. Like, our post-apocalyptic selves are still raring to go. So people are putting their bodies on in front of those, in front of the onslaught against the earth. Physical bodies. Much precarity to their own selves and their own lives. So I was thinking about, like, right here, like Grassy Narrows. They have one of the longest running blockades against logging. They've raised an immense amount of information and understanding of how mercury works, which mercury poisoning in their water has destroyed generations, made generations sick. So, in a way, their fight against forestry, just even the forestry industry, which includes our Ontario government, is a microcosm of this idea of apocalypse that is there in Apocalypto. And then we have the pipeline protests right now, which is, like, making all the news. So all of these, for me, oil is not about oil. It's about water, because it's the destruction of our lifeblood, the water, the lifeblood of the earth. That is what we are afraid of. Not anti-technology or anti-whatever. People live in the now. But it's definitely the water that's the issue. It's the tailing ponds. It's the busted pipes. It's that kind of thing. And if we think about ourselves, there's a couple other prophecies that sort of make sense to me right now that we're standing at this decision-making time. So I did an exhibition called The Fifth World, which was a way for me to think about how artists are dealing with this idea of being right at a moment of decision between a path of destruction and a path of creation. The idea of the fifth world is we can choose the fifth world, or we can choose the fourth world, and the fourth world is just the end, it's the end for us. And that is to continue on a path of destruction and violence and aggression, occupation, colonization, capitalism, I could go on. And that we are faced with that choice. And people who choose the fifth world, what they're choosing is they're choosing to reconnect to the earth and to the land and to their original responsibilities. Unfortunately, we have like this new age movement that has sort of destroyed these concepts in some ways, like robbed them of their depth and kind of made them into a lifestyle choice, which is not what they are. So I'm being pushed to think about how can people have that relationship with the earth, such that you feel it's your mother, such that you want to take care of it. And for us as Anishinaabe, we have ceremonies that help with that. We have ways of thinking about the world that help with that. But I've been so anti-sharing because of how our culture gets taken up and destroyed by somebody else. And it comes back to our children in this really perverted form. So I'm now at the point where I believe that for this end of the world that we're facing right now, we do have to share our ceremonies and we do have to invite people in. But it has to be done Indigenous-led, and it has to be done by Indigenous invitation, I think, because it's the only way we can protect what it means and protect its process and where it's leading us. So I think that in this post-apocalyptic time that we're living in right now, this is what we need, and it's not canoeing in Algonquin Park. No, but I hear this a lot. Every time I have this conversation, I hear it's like you get a canoe in Algonquin Park. It does help for sure. It helps, but it's not the whole thing. Or like camping and roasting wieners. We shouldn't be eating wieners at all. That's also part of the problem. Well, unless they're buffalo burgers or something like that. So the question is, how, for me and for you, we can talk about this. In this moment, how do we get to the point where we can share if the relationship is so broken between Indigenous understandings, Indigenous worldviews, and Indigenous people and everybody else? Because without these ideas transferring to everybody else, we're still stuck in the same place. But there's a relationship that's broken. So the sharing is stopping. It's hard to share with any kind of feeling that it's going to be a just relationship. So this is a question I'm still sitting with. And it's like, where do you start? How do you begin? And so we're still like, we're cracking the plate on the earth. We're going to take a chance. That as we step over this line and we make this choice, I'm choosing the fifth world. Some people are going to continue to choose the fourth worlds. And violence won't solve the issue, won't solve it. Like taking up arms or doing that kind of revolution, we know that doesn't work because all we're done is stuck with the violence inside of our communities. So I feel that we watch that with a lot of the independence movements around the globe. It's like you're facing violence with violence, and then you're just left with your community and the unhealthiness of that violence. And our communities are still addressing all the violence that has been committed against us. And because I think of the Anishinaabe spirit that Nanibush fought for, that spirit, we can't turn the violence outward. We turn it internally. Because we learned very early on that the violence outward was not good. So we turned it internal against ourselves. And so because all violence has to go somewhere. So that's the kind of thing that we're starting to address, with residential schools and these kinds of. We have this question of the relationship and how do we have a just relationship such that we can share the ideas that might lead us to choose the fifth world and our reconnection to the earth. So I'm just going to end it there. So if you want questions or you want to say your own thoughts and comments, please feel welcome. Things I wanted to show, which kind of show the crack. The fancy word is cognitive dissonance. So, and I think Robert Gould came up with another one the other day. What was it? Cognitive indifference is like how we're treated. So how our ideas are treated. So that's sort of, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I don't know if I'll do a good job because I'm somebody who makes I do more experimental stuff. I don't do documentary, but I feel like he needs a documentary that's mixed genres. Will still be experimental, will still be a bit of fiction. And I'm somebody who makes stuff. I don't worry about the rules of things, obviously. So I just make stuff and hope it comes out right. So somebody else can make a proper doc. I hope they do. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Just wanted to, when you said remembering through the heart, I'm from Chile, and in Spanish, it's recordar, and that means to bring through the heart again. So to remember is to literally bring it through over and over again. So as a sort of a channel or a thread, like keeps on going.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's something. When you're raised in a culture that's denigrated, you tend to want to excel at the other culture. Like, you have to be so much better at everything than they do because they already assume you're terrible at it. So, like, going into like academic thinking, I had to be the best philosopher, the best reader, the best thinker, dealing with all the complicated concepts, and then one day I was like, you lose yourself. You lose the thinking in Anishinaabe. You lose the bodily relationship to being Anishinaabe when you do that. And so I went through this process of like, okay, what is knowledge that comes from the heart? Like, what kind of truth is that? What kind of talking is that? How does it happen? How does it take place? Like, if I stop giving lectures where I am quoting Derrida and Lacan, what happens, you know? And so it's like, I still use them. I still think through them because everybody has insights into this world. So everybody has experiences. So they have their own truth too. They just make it really hard to find. But it's like, so I stopped reading lectures and I stopped writing lectures. So it's a process of prayer in the morning and asking for what's supposed to come. And then when I'm here, it shifts again because I'm also feeding off people's energy and what's going on. So there's also the idea that whatever comes out, as long as I'm speaking the truth from myself, and speaking only of what I know, then whatever falls on you, you will pick up and you will take away. And you won't carry it all. You'll just carry whatever's meaningful to you. And then even like 20 years from now, something might come that just clicks differently. So it's like a real trust of the chancing nature, even of learning and thinking and talking and listening, you know? Yeah. Anything?
How's the energy here today?
How's the energy? Well, some of you are sleeping a little. Some of you are really, really in it, you know. Some people were in it and then sleeping a little. So it's like, yeah, it's good energy. It's really positive and it feels like, ooh, there's love in here. So, yeah.
I mean, does anyone else? I mean, I just wanted. Your voice and heart is extremely generous. So I want to say thank you for that. I feel very moved. It's funny, so I don't want to say that much, but it's
Very loud.
yeah, it's very difficult.
You're allowed to have
find
emotions.
someone that can do through the heart and through the head together, and I knew that from watching your lectures and I heard you before, but it's a very difficult thing to do. And thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
And defined.
Yeah, it takes, it takes doing it.
So if I understand you properly, we're on the edge of the third apocalypse.
Yeah. I think we're in it. Like, for me, end of the world is a process and a moment of transformation, so we're in it already. I mean, and I actually think I use the flood metaphor because I think that's the one we're going to have. Like, it will be a flood and a fire, right? So we got to be aware of that. Even like deforestation means that the water accumulates. So it's like, for me, it's still a flood. It's still going to be a flood.
Where does art stand in the middle of all that?
Art is, for me, is the great imagining. So for me, like, we don't have a future without art. Art is the way in which we can envision the choice of the fifth world. We can envision what that might be. It's the imagination of a different possibility. And sometimes it's the enactment of it too, in the very process of making, in the very process of showing, in the very process of engaging. So that's what art is for me. Yeah?
I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about leadership, like the leadership that people must take. And the reason I mention that is because I'm also thinking about what Judge Murray St. Clair said, which was that that how we address reconciliation, how this is a Canadian problem. So that I think that there's two things happening here. So what can settlers do, and then also how do we follow?
Yeah, I hate the word settler. I know this is like the new politics to call ourselves settlers. Well, not me, but you. But that's what it creates, right? I don't like those kinds of energies flowing around. Plus, I fucking hate the word settler just because it's so violent to me. Like the word, I experience it like a violence again. So I like the idea of treating people more because it sort of forces you to be responsible to this document and to this agreement and to this relationship and to think about what that responsibility is. I think I understand settler is meant to make us think about the kind of white supremacy and these kinds of things, like the negative side of colonization. But I think if we are, for me, I want us to actually start from a place of responsibility rather than guilt. So I think that's one of the things, like when he says it's reconciliation is a Canadian issue, residential schools is a Canadian issue, not just an Indigenous issue, that's what he's also referring to, is that it's the relationship. The problem for me with the word relationship is that it's not political enough. It doesn't sort of capture the asymmetry of our current relationship. So the fact that we're not standing on the same ground that's even. We're Indigenous people are still fighting for like basic rights in this country. So, and the flip side also, the land is Indigenous land. So that's also asymmetrical in that sense. So it's so the word relationship is good at a personal level too, because it sort of makes us address like one-to-one. Think about it as a relationship. What kinds of things do we do to make a relationship good? Being vulnerable, learning how to be vulnerable, learning how to be open, all these kinds of things that are so difficult in love relationships are very similar in political relationships. So the way that societies respond to each other. So I think there is productivity in thinking about what a good relationship is in terms of how to think about our relationship politically, but that can only go so far. Like at the end of the day, there are some basic things we have to think about, and land for me is central. Indigenous people have 2% of the land and 98% of the property. There's a direct relationship between that. A people without land is a people that is poor, and it's always been the case. And so without us, for me, that is the first step. It's not like us learning to like each other. It's actually like a gesture of giving the land back that has to happen. And it's such a difficult thing to think through, but not really. There's two things. One, majority of land in Canada is not lived on. Majority of land in Canada is not lived on by non-native people. So there are ways we can restructure quite easily to allow Indigenous people their hunting territories and all those kinds of things. And the second thing is a conceptual shift. So and for me, it's like nobody owns the land, right? Nobody owns it. You can't own a mother. But we can think of us as custodians of this territory and sharing it with other people. And that sharing relationship is supposed to be for mutual benefit. So that's a very basic concept that can restructure Canada quite easily. There's also accounting systems, like really basic accounting systems that work. It's like you can calculate, if we, let's just use my reserve for example. We had a chunk of land that is in southern Ontario that is the most profitable farming land in all of, it's around Lake Simcoe, Collingwood area, Coldwater. So that land was appropriated by settlers, and I say colonizers because that's really what it is. At the time, when people were away hunting, they just moved in and then set up shop, and that's it. That land, if you take the wealth that has accumulated for Canada and for those individual families, you can calculate what was taken, like these things, or you can calculate what it cost, like what environmental destruction means in terms of poverty. You can calculate these things, and I think those are important sort of steps in terms of thinking about reconciliation in a concrete way that isn't just like let's all like hold hands and sing kumbaya and move forward together. So not that I don't mind that too. We did the round dances for this reason, so that we could have a moment, a utopic moment where we can all be in the circle together, fighting for the same thing. We are fighting for water. But that's a utopic moment, and it's a gesture, and it's a ceremony. It doesn't actually exist in the world, right? We have to build that, and that's like I think that's what's beautiful about protests that are actually ceremonial or artistic in some nature, is that it gives you the gesture that you're supposed to work towards. It gives you experience of it. I don't know if that's an answer.
No, it's a great answer. I don't want to occupy all your time, but I wanted to also mention something that I've recently come across is the politics of recognition. So meaning that it's not enough just to talk about it as
Yeah. Well, some of my best friends disagree with me on this. They're not here talking, so it's okay. But we as Anishinaabe people, some of the philosophy around relationship is that is that there is kind of an openness that you're supposed to start from, and that created a situation where we did work for a politics of recognition. Like asking the government to honor its end of the treaties, talking to the government to get this, or talking to the Canadian people, or like this process, and we still do it. Like we do so much education and talking, and God, we're nice. But fundamentally, there is something wrong with that kind of politics, which I think also led to Idle No More, and is older than Idle No More. It's also a stream of politics that's been around forever, which is the assertion of sovereignty, or the assertion of Indigenous inherent right to the land. So those kinds of gestures are harder for the Canadian public to take, because it's not asking for anything, it's taking, it's doing, it's acting. So it's like living as an Anishinaabe, moving out on the land, building your ceremonial places, going and hunting without permission, going fishing without permission, all those kinds of actions that people are taking across the country and all the way down south. They're scarier for us, but it's the only one that gets us out of that politics of recognition. Because we can knock on the door forever, but we're still letting somebody else decide what's going to happen. And this is how we got here in the first place. It's like Canada's still deciding how things will change. Even the Liberal government currently has great words, but they're still making a decision about what change will happen. And Indigenous people, to move out of politics of recognition, just need to assert their own understanding of how things should go forward. It's a lot to take in. Yeah.
Is colonizer the same thing as settler, or is there a difference?
For me, it is. If you go to technicalities, no, it's not the same. There's like a period of time, there's different periods of time that people mark out as when you're actually building the country here versus
Okay. Colonizers.
just taking out. So yeah, I don't care about those distinctions so much. What I do care about is that there are time periods, early time periods that we can look at when the relationship was much better. So that I care about. Shall we sing Kumbaya? No. Okay, thanks for listening and everything like that.